Emerging technologies keep the business world abuzz with the promise of new opportunities. And one sector that's particularly energized today is the startup community, as you can see in that video, of course. Modern-day startups, they're nimble, they're savvy, and well-positioned to harness these opportunities. And for more on that, let's meet our panel. We got a good one for you. From the Microsoft New York City, we have entrepreneur in residence Teresa Nemeshani here with us. And from Great Horn, the cloud security firm that's making headlines for its cutting-edge cybersecurity solution, we have CEO Kevin O'Brien here. And finally, from Littlebits, the breakthrough startup that's making electrical engineering accessible and fun for everyone, including your kids, we have retail account manager Kristen Smith. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We are going to start with our poll question. This is where we turn the tables on the audience. We ask you a question. You weigh in and we'll reveal those results here during the interview. Now imagine you are handed $250,000 to build something that disrupts your industry on purpose. Which emerging technology do you base it on? Where are you going to spend your money? A, artificial intelligence, B, cloud, C, augmented reality, D, blockchain, or will it be Internet of Things? It's your $250,000 to spend. Let us know where you're going to spend it and we'll reveal those results and we'll react here coming up. Teresa, let's start with you. You have an interesting job title. How do I get entrepreneur in residence? And what does that mean?
Sure. So as we're hearing today, Microsoft invests a whole lot into emerging technology that we create ourselves, right? Well, it's no surprise that tremendous innovation in emerging technology also is developed outside of the walls of Microsoft. Not a big shocker, right? Well, that technology is very important to us as well. And much of it comes through startups. And those startups tend to be born in ecosystems, in startup ecosystems. So I am our captain, if you will, for the startup ecosystem in New York. Pretty big one, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time that I spend is with major accelerators, third-party accelerators, not ones that are actually run by Microsoft, but they're very important to us because they really have their fingers on the pulse of what's coming up. We get to meet those startups and really start placing some bets ourselves in terms of where we think interesting things are happening. We want to make meaning between those startups and Microsoft because, again, a lot of really interesting innovation is happening there. So, confession, I am a recovering entrepreneur myself.
Yes,
that's the vantage point that I come from, right? Forgive me for
So
that.
am I. You're in a safe place.
And a lot of my job is not only talking to many, and kind of picking some that look really interesting and who perhaps they have great track records or they're onto something. And I'll advocate for them inside of Microsoft, advocate to them to our customers, and advocate for Microsoft back to them as well, because so much has changed at Microsoft. There are a lot of assets here that can really help them grow further and faster.
It's obviously familiar to entrepreneurs and small business model that often it's just a few people trying to do something great with very little. So it makes sense that emerging technologies would be a big part of that. What are you seeing?
That's really so true. And I think when we pick some favorite emerging technologies right now, such as artificial intelligence, everything related to the cloud, virtual reality, IoT, et cetera.
Right.
It's oftentimes startups that rush to the fore to create the earliest implementations in disruptive scenarios for specific verticals, et cetera. They're super rapid iteration, and they learn a lot really fast. So you really can have kind of David-Goliath situation.
Yeah.
So we want to be around that.
Yeah. Now, during the introduction, I mentioned that you're a part of the disruptive startups world. Kevin, let's start with you. Tell us about Great Horn. Talk about the company in general, and why should the people watching pay close attention to what you're doing?
Sure. So Great Horn is a cybersecurity solution that's focused on the kinds of threats that we see come over what we call cloud communications infrastructure. And so we started this business with first an observation. 90% of all of the data breaches that you've seen in the news over the past couple of years, think about the Office of Personnel Management at the federal government level, or the loss of data records around our health insurance from something like an Anthem. Those attacks start today not by somebody writing some custom piece of code that's going to be super targeted around your organization. It happens, but most of the time, it's actually because somebody impersonates an individual inside of that company be it a CEO or a CFO or some other senior executive, and tricks an ordinary employee into doing something they shouldn't. Now, this is not a brand new problem, but when we looked at the market, we saw that the ways that big companies were protecting themselves against this are very much old school. They were running devices that you had to go and provision, put on a server rack somewhere, spend weeks or even months getting them up and running, and then dedicate resource to solving all of these security challenges that they would highlight. We said there's got to be a better way. We live in this era of cloud computing and technology and big data, instant on operationalization of these kinds of technologies like, say, Office 365, which you can stand up in minutes, not weeks or months. So we said we should have a security solution for that threat that works exactly the same way. And that's what Great Horn is.
Wow. All right, so what kind of emerging tech did you implement?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that companies have when they start thinking about this problem space, unless you're in a very select and narrow band of industry, in all likelihood, you cannot hire enough security professionals to sift through all of the data and find threats at the moment they come in. So we invested heavily at the outset in artificial intelligence and machine learning to allow us to do that on behalf of our clients. And today, when we stand up something like a Great Horn environment for a customer of ours, we're providing them protection immediately. At the moment they stand up that instance, which takes only 5 or 10 minutes, they're benefiting from all of that collective wisdom, all of that cloud computing power, and all of that artificial intelligence to defend what they can't hire someone to do manually.
Right. And you're still a relatively small company trying to solve a pretty big problem. So for the big companies out there, how do they implement what you started to discover?
Yeah. So let me take an example from one of those clients of ours that represents a fairly large company. We work with the West Coast technology firm that does customer experience surveys. They're the fastest growing company in the space. They've been using us for the last 2 months. And they were receiving, on average, 50 of these impersonation attacks to their CFO, pretending to come from the CEO, a week. Wow. And so that was yielding a tremendous amount of work for them, and it was representing a major threat, because if even just one of those 50 were to actually be executed, they would wire out tens of millions of dollars. Catastrophic for a business. They were able to stand up Great Horn in under 5 minutes, and they went on record last week in a major piece of press for us saying that they were now catching through Great Horn 90% of those attacks with no manual labor, no effort. Wow. They only look at it once a week to confirm that the system's still working because it's doing such a good job. And that's the story for any big company, because we've made that investment on the technological side to make it easy to stand up.
Great. Kristen? Hey. Tell us a little bit about littleBits. What problem are you trying to solve and why?
Yeah, so if you think about it, we have 65% of grade school children will have jobs in the future that don't exist yet. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is equip the next generation with the tools that they need to be prepared for those jobs and careers of the future. So littleBits is a platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks. Think Legos for the next generation. When you snap them together, you make circuits, and those circuits make inventions. With our platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks, we're literally on a mission to get the world inventing.
Wow, we love that. So what innovation and emerging technologies is littleBits leaning on?
Yeah, so in New York, in our Manhattan office, we have a team of engineers, and those engineers are literally prototyping new bits all of the time. We're always on the search with our R&D team to figure out what are the new bits and technologies that we need to bring into our platform. For example, we have the cloud bit, which connects to the cloud, of course, so you can now have cloud connectivity with your inventions. But I think what's more important when you're talking about emerging technology and littleBits is how littleBits is actually educating our users about the emerging technologies around them. Think about it. There's so many devices in our everyday lives that we encounter that most of us can't really explain how they work or really understand what's happening behind that glass screen. And so with littleBits, you can actually recreate those emerging technologies. Think your IoT devices that are super hot right now. With littleBits, you can actually recreate Nest. But even further, our founder believes that you should not just consume electronics, but you should create with electronics. With littleBits, you can actually create inventions to solve problems that are maybe only unique to you. Like the father whose daughters, their chore was to feed the chickens. And when he went on vacation, he wanted to make sure they're doing their chores. So he actually created an invention using littleBits to make sure that his daughters were feeding the chickens.
Wow. We love that. All right, well, so let's talk about, from the startup world, how it's different using emerging technologies versus, big established organizations who are maybe too scared, right, to try something new. Everybody can weigh in on this. The difference in how startups are infusing life with emerging technology.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's all about rapid iteration, failing fast, and shipping something very quickly, and seeing if it works in and of itself, and also how it interacts with the end user or the customer that's going to use it. You just can't wait to put something out. They say no battle plan survives contact, with the enemy or with the market. And startups need to live and die by this. And they truly do. And the most disciplined, smartest startups are, iterating and shipping at a rate that, traditional companies, hadn't been. They weren't really built around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us at Little Bits, our platform is modular, and you're talking about how quickly startups can move, and we really take that modular approach internally as well. And so not only are the kits modular, but internally when we have to solve a problem, it's about figuring out which of that piece do we need to maybe move around, reconfigure. That allows us to move so quickly.
So I started working in technology 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you look at how we built technology in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was slow, it was difficult to test. Having the ability to now execute so quickly and iterate so quickly gives us a tremendous market advantage. And a lot of large companies in a space like ours are still stuck with those legacy products and those legacy processes. So much like what Teresa and Kristen said, having that technology at our disposal without all of the anchor weight behind us of old school servers and old school processes for software development, let us compete even in markets that are very big and very established.
So Teresa, it sounds like your work obviously exposes you to a lot of small businesses. How do you select Great Horn, Little Bits, how do you select them and why?
So on one level, I won't lie, pounding the pavement constantly, seeing thousands of startups. So there is a volume aspect. And I think you do start seeing some patterns. But, you need to be smart about it. We have great partners in the marketplace. You're constantly nurturing connections among other people who are hopefully smarter than you are that are seeing really interesting things. So keeping constantly connected with that is a big piece of it. Another thing is that through sort of programs and touch points that Microsoft does have with startups such as Great Horn and Little Bits that we've been working actually quite deeply with, we really get to know them. And so similarly to the testing we were talking about, we start doing something together that's kind of easy, a little small, low risk. And then when we learn from that, let's double down, let's do something a little bit bigger together, and then let's build on that and build on that. So there's a well-respected venture capitalist named Mark Suster who likes to say he invests in lines, not dots. And I think that's a key message to think about with the startup ecosystems. I truly believe in Great Horn and Little Bits and that they're going to be successful, but I also truly believe in Kevin, and I believe in Kristen and the team at Little Bits. And whether it's the startups that they're working on or the next things that they work on, really great people keep coming back and keep coming back. So we want to kind of keep our fingers on the pulse of really smart people who are always moving on to the next emerging technology.
Well, and so, speaking of that, what trends are we seeing in the startup world in respect to emerging technology?
I touch pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
Some favorites, a ton happening in blockchain right now. It's been very exciting to watch Microsoft making big bets around blockchain as a service.
Sure.
That creates kind of a rallying point where even more startups are attracted to do stuff with us. Virtual and augmented reality, huge. Absolutely anything and everything, cloud enabled. We're seeing artificial intelligence being applied to so many different scenarios. Some you would expect and many you would never, have thought of. And then it kind of builds on itself. So a little bit like the modular Legos, you start combining different emerging technologies and truly, new futures emerge from that. Yeah.
You're talking
It's a
about
pretty good
new
list.
futures. So let's ask you, the forecasting time, crystal ball, where do you see your companies in 2020, which is terrifyingly close? It's hardly the future. But where do you see? What does your company expect? What do you think is realistic?
So the trend that isn't going to slow down is the adoption of cloud computing. And I think if you look in the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000, these are organizations that are making big bets in foundational ways today that their businesses are going to run in a different fashion than they did even 5 years ago. So we see Great Horn as being the security fabric for cloud communication infrastructure. Anytime either individuals or systems communicate, we think we have a role to play in authenticating that messaging and making sure it's not an attacker trying to steal sensitive data or get resources they shouldn't have access to.
What do you think? Little bits?
So
2020.
2020, so close.
Still
right?
on Earth, right?
Still on Earth.
Okay.
Right around the corner. You know, when we think about little bits and we think about the future, remember, as every student is required to have a calculator to go to school, or maybe every single parent doesn't hesitate to bring Play-Doh or Legos into the household, we really believe that across nationwide, worldwide, schools and parents at home the little bits will be the common product that they're bringing in. It'll be the standard that they grow their children up with, and that students and kids will start to be able to recognize all the electronic components on all the technology around them through playing with little bits.
So I'm going to throw a curveball in here, if I may, since we have a little time together. So I'm a mother of two daughters, a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they're big Little Bits fans. So in 2020, right, my 13-year-old is going to approximately be graduating from high school, maybe, hopefully, right around then. And, you know, I would love to be able to say as a parent that my daughters are conversant in how things work, in electronics and stuff like that, and are actually pretty fearless about saying, well, such and such doesn't exist. Let me try to make it.
Right.
So that's my vision for 2020.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Take that a step further. We believe that the innovation is going to be coming out of the labs of Microsoft and MIT and into the homes, and I don't think it's going to be far off where we're seeing very powerful ideas, inventions, new emerging technologies that are going to be coming from a home in the Midwest or a school down south. I think it's not far off.
We've done some pop-up events together, you know, bringing kids to the table, and, you know, what they come up with, you just wouldn't have on your own. Remember the kid, Odin, with the anti-bullying machine?
Yes, awesome.
Yeah,
Love that.
you know, put it in their hands and see what they create.
Yeah.
So we really need to democratize open source innovation, get younger and younger so that our kids are equipped to make.
I want to weigh in on that for a minute, too. So we're obviously in a slightly different market. I don't have the pleasure of working with kids very often in cybersecurity. But around the time that 2020 comes around, the folks who are in late elementary school, high school today, they'll be entering the job market. And as a serial entrepreneur, as someone who hires a lot of technologists, I think there's a real gap in the level of skill that we see. And so when you start to be able to democratize some of that access to not just creativity and inquisition, but technological expertise, you're building a workforce that folks like me hire. And so I think we're very excited to see things like that start to happen, because the more we can drive into public education, early childhood, a sense of curiosity about how the world works, about how these new technologies work, the more ready we are to compete on a global stage.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, in a world of, don't worry, there's an app for that, we should also make sure that we actually know how stuff works a little bit. So
Or I'll make an app for that.
Yes, I'll make the app for that, exactly. Before we move on, I want to circle back to our poll question. We put it out to the audience. We have thousands of people watching right now. We like to take their temperature, find out what they think on these questions. That poll question, ladies and gentlemen, you remember it, you know it well, and you've weighed in. Imagine you were handed $250,000 to build something that disrupts your industry. Which one emerging technology do you base it on? Would you spend it on artificial intelligence? Would it be cloud? Would it be augmented reality? Or would it be blockchain? Or maybe it's Internet of Things. What do you think? Survey says 34% says Internet of Things. Your reactions to where they would spend their $250,000?
I think we're talking about the same thing we were talking about just a second ago, which is that technology, when you think about the Internet of Things, is about driving that technology into the products we use on a day-to-day basis. So I'm unsurprised by this result.
Yeah, same. Doesn't surprise me either.
Good results.
Yeah, I think we're all, inhabiting a world now, especially mobile kind of put us into this mindset where you always have a computer in your pocket.
Yeah.
And now I think we're like, okay, everything that's around us has computing potential and data
Right.
potential and can provide, goodness to us that we never would have imagined before. IoT is super exciting in every aspect.
Absolutely. Well, we know we've covered a lot today, but we do have thousands of people watching from across the country. Specifically from your businesses, for the folks watching, they're going to leave here and talk about this Emerging Tech Summit they watched. It was really cool. I heard about this Great Horn. What would you want them to say about your company if they're going to walk away and remember you for what?
Yeah. If you are in a public or privately traded company, I guarantee you your boardroom is looking at your cyber risk. And it's saying, how are we going to not be in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the front page of the BBC for the wrong thing? And we are a very easy way to protect against the single most pervasive cyber attack and threat vector in the world. We're doing it for hundreds of thousands of different mailboxes and clients today. And it's something that anyone who's watching could bring to their CIO or their chief security officer and be up and running in just 15 minutes. So I'd want them to walk away with that idea that this is important, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
Kristen, little bits, what do you want them to remember?
Bits. Yeah, I'd say to remember that it is not hard to get your kids involved in electronics and coding. You don't have to have knowledge in it prior to bring this into the home and have your kids just have a blast learning with Littlebits. I would say run, don't walk to MicrosoftStores.com where you can purchase Littlebits. If you have kids, you will not regret bringing this into the home and just watching your kids go to town building things like a BitBot, a remote control car, or even pranks, all with electronics, of course, while they're learning STEM along the way.
Yeah, we love it. All right, well, and from your point, Teresa, what do you think? What would you like folks to leave this session? What impression would you like to make?
I'd like to leave the message of try fast, fail fast, iterate. So if there's an emerging technology you're curious about, think about a cheap and easy way that you can test it out. That might be, calling up a startup that's already a little further along than you are and saying, hey, can we do something together? Let's try something. And, keep it narrow, keep it light, but try. If you don't try, you won't learn.
Love it. Great stuff. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We would love to give everybody a tangible opportunity to follow up. Where would you like them to go to get more info specifically? If they say, yeah, I do love that. My kids do need to have that. Where would you send them?
Littlebits.cc.
Okay.
Anyone who's interested in trying out Great Horn inside the organization can go to greathorn.com and click the try button on the top right.
Okay. And otherwise,
Follow me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Teresa N.
Just bang it. Just bang it. Whatever you need to know, just bang it. It's all out there for you. Thank you all so much for your time. We appreciate it.